Greetings, I'm Dr. Sean Reed, author of The Dating Toolbox, available on Amazon.com. All right, guys, so today I want to explain why you cannot get good relationship advice from academia. And the bottom line is that academia, for the most part, teaches a hatred and disrespect of men, and it's incapable of providing advice to foster stable, loving relationships between men and women, okay? And throughout this video, I'm going to unpack and explain why this is true, and then what you can do as a guy to get good relationship advice, to learn how to get women to love you and to stay in love with you, okay? So when I talk about academia, when I talk about the university, I'm primarily talking about the discipline that's supposed to help men and women foster successful relationships, and that discipline is psychology, okay? And the problem with psychology is that it's heavily biased. It has a heavy liberal bias, and part of that liberal bias is hardcore feminism, which modern feminism teaches the hatred of men. In my book, a most recent example is Susanna Walters, a pretty prominent professor, department head, and I think she went in Northeastern, I'm trying to remember which college. She's at a major university, and she argues basically that women have a right to hate men. And in my book, I'm not going to go over every quote. I have more than 12 examples of famous college professors making statements arguing that are basically our hate speech directed towards men, and that is fully accepted, and that is actually a dominant paradigm in academia, and that's heavily affected the discipline of psychology, which is the discipline, as I mentioned, devoted to building healthy relationships. So a recent example is NYU social scientist Jonathan Haidt, very famous social scientist. He asked 1,000 psychologists, are you liberal or are you conservative? And 997 responded that they were liberal, okay? Very few social scientists, very few psychologists are moderate or conservative. So they are all tied into that liberal agenda. And quite frankly, there's heavy bias against conservatives in academia. When I was in academia, I remember I was working for a professor. I was on a hiring committee, and basically he said, take these 15 applications here, throw them in the garbage. And I'm like, why? And he's like, well, they're from white males, and we simply aren't considering white males for a hiring position. Ironically, I taught at a historically black university, and that university actually was interested in hiring black professors, but that's sort of beyond the point of this video. So what I want to do is I want to talk about now why this liberal bias creates a situation where men simply cannot get good relationship advice, right? So being liberal shouldn't automatically mean that you're giving bad relationship advice, but I will explain why this discrimination, why this liberal bias results in bad relationship advice. So in my book, I argue, and this is a fact, that male and female brains are different. Okay, I've talked about this in previous videos, but it bears repeating. The female and the male brain are different, okay? Women are predominantly white matter, and they're process-oriented. Men are predominantly gray matter, which means they're problem-solution-oriented. So this results in a very different way of dealing with relationships, okay? And unless you understand this fact, you are doomed to failure. You're not going to have successful relationships. The key to successful relationships, the absolute bottom line, is learning how the female brain works, and then learning how to keep that type of brain, that process-oriented brain, in love with you. Now, in academia, they refuse to accept this fact. We've had tons of scientific developments, MRIs, all these new CAT scans, all these new methods of brain imaging has shown us that without a fact, just as clear as the earth is round, male and female brains are different. The problem is academia refuses to recognize that because they believe that if you argue that female and male brains are different, that's going to mean that male brains might be superior, which they're not. Male brains might be superior, they're just different, which they're not, and that might lead to discrimination and bias. So the whole discipline of psychology operates from this belief that male and female brains are the same, and they're not, okay? How does this play out in the real world? Well, men are problem solution oriented, okay? So that means, and this is an evolutionary process. It goes back hundreds of thousands of years, and it was tied into how we evolved and how we survived as a species, okay? Men were very task focused, right? Hunt, right? Make weapons, do very specific things. And what that did is it sort of produced a problem solution approach to life. You worked on this problem, you solved this problem, then you moved on to another problem. The female brain had to be very different. The female brain is process oriented because women had to accomplish many tasks at once, right? I don't want to argue that the woman's job was running the cave, but a woman had she had to gather, she had to take care of the kids, watch the fire. She had to do 10 different things. So the female brain evolved to be process oriented. And in a way, I'm sort of arguing here that the female brain is superior, right? So this really isn't a sexist argument. I'm arguing that brains are different and women are much better at multitasking than men. So, my argument isn't really sexist. That's sort of the irony of this, is that I'm arguing that women are different, and actually in today's world, the female brain is really, that's why young women are out earning men, because many of the development in job markets require a process-oriented brain that's able to multitask, that's able to do many things at once. My wife, she can handle multiple conference calls, work on emails. She can do all these things at once, whereas I could never do that. I'm a pretty smart guy, but I can't multitask like she can. So in order to successfully manage relationships, you have to understand this fundamental difference in the female and the male brain, and psychologists refuse to accept this. As a matter of fact, in studies of the topics, female scientists that are feminists, argue that claiming that brains are different, even though the evidence is overwhelmingly, is what they call neurosexism. So the whole academics, psychologists, as by and large, and we saw 997 out of 1,000 refuse to accept this fact that brains are different. Okay? And unless you understand this fact, you can't successfully keep a woman in love with you. Okay? So that's why I argue things like, when your woman wants to come home and talk about her day, you listen, because that's how women solve their problems, right? A man will think about something, he'll work his way through that process, and then he'll have a question, and he'll ask his question, Joe, how do I solve this problem, okay? Women are different. When women are talking, they're working through that problem. That's how they come to their conclusion. And the mistake men make is we jump in and interrupt them. And so that's one of the reasons why I argue that when your wife or your significant other comes home and she wants to talk about her day, you don't go into problem-solving mode. You listen to her, okay? You let her work through that process. And I could give 100 other examples of this, but the video is starting to run a little long. We're approaching 10 minutes. So I want to revisit my main point, and that main point is you can't get good relationship advice from academia. Making things worse is, quite frankly, academia teaches a hatred of men, It doesn't teach an understanding of the differences between men and women, and it doesn't encourage what I encourage, and that is something called love. So my big thing is getting women to love us and stay in love with us. So if you want to call that sexist, then you can call that whatever you want, but that's the bottom line, is by recognizing these brain differences between men and women, we can become better at keeping women in love with us. All right, guys. So if you like what you saw and you heard today, please hit that like and subscribe button. I want to build a community of men getting women to love us and to stay in love with us, and happy dating.